Hi everybody, welcome into part 2 of the No Big Six experiment, I suppose. After the success of the first episode, and thank you so much to everybody who watched it, I brought it back, and in this one we're going to have a look at where the players went, but also what happened in the next 10 years to see if Newcastle could continue their domination, and would we finally get an English winner of the Champions League? Well, let's find out. Well, let's start with Marcus Rashford. He left Manchester United and went over to Spain, where he made 32 appearances for Real Madrid. Then he moved to Newcastle, 122 games with 48 goals, before flying out to Saudi Arabia, making 68 appearances with 38 goals. Retired at the age of 34, no intention on staying in football either. Maybe he went into politics. Who knows? Well, what about Mohamed Salah? At the age of 38, he's retired as well, and after leaving Liverpool, he went to the sunny climes of Spain. Made 166 appearances and scoring 101 goals for Barcelona before as well going to Saudi. 48 goals in 68 appearances, which is really impressive. Odegaard, well, at 34 years old, he's still playing. He's playing out in Saudi. However, after leaving Arsenal, he moved to Paris Saint-Germain, where he spent a large amount of time. In fact, remember, he will have claimed a number of Champions League trophies. Not a bad move for him, to be fair. What about Erling Haaland? Well, as expected, at just 32, he's still playing, and he's at PSG as well. What surprises me most about the Erling Haaland situation is after he got released by Manchester City, he didn't get the big move straight away. He actually went to Rennes. Quite surprising, really. After spending 3 years at Rennes and absolutely smashing in the goals, he got his £125 million move to Paris Saint-Germain, and he's been there ever since. And to be honest, he's been quite sensational. So another player who's moved and won countless trophies, including four Champions Leagues. Let's have a quick refresher on what happened last season for anybody who has maybe not seen it, or maybe it's been a while since you watched the first part and just can't remember. Aston Villa won the Premier League, 85 points, while Manchester United and Manchester City, who had clawed their way back from League 2 to get back to the Premier League, both got relegated. And in the Championship, well, the other four teams from the Big Six, Arsenal, Tottenham, Liverpool, and Chelsea, completely forgot about Chelsea there. They didn't come up. They are looking nowhere near coming up. In fact, they're all stuck in mid-table. Now, somebody did ask me where Wrexham are. They were in the Championship last season, but they got relegated. Carl Piagani was their manager. So he used to play for Stevenage. He looks like quite a lower league player. Interesting managerial choice. There we go. He's gone from AFC Clyde, where he was there for a year, to Wrexham. And AFC Clyde, okay, they're in League One. That's impressive. But yeah, Wrexham got relegated. So that's so I did get asked a couple of times where they were in the comments of part 1. So that's where they are at the moment. Anyway, let's get on with the first season of the second part. Will we see Man City and Man United bounce back? Will we see any of the other four actually push for promotion? Let's find out. Right then, so that season is done. Let's have a look at what actually happened. Well, Everton have won the Premier League. I mean, Everton fans are going to love it. So Newcastle finished second, Fulham third, and Palace were fourth. Villa went from champions to fifth, while relegated were Wolves, Luton and Blackburn. Honestly, Everton have done really well. And if we look at their squad, they've got Aaron Ramsdale in goal. Darwin Núñez up front for Everton, who has been there since he was released by Liverpool, so he obviously didn't want to leave Merseyside. And he's been pretty consistent, averaging, for the last 4 or 5 seasons, a minimum of 15 goals in the league every single year. Congratulations to Everton. That's really impressive. It means they get Champions League football next year. Championship, Manchester City absolutely ran away with the league. 104 points and a bounce back straight back to the Premier League after relegation. Absolutely brilliant season for them, only conceding 40 goals over the course of the season. And Chelsea have finally strapped up their laces, pulled up the socks, and got back to the Premier League as well. After they won the playoffs, they finished third with 81 points, while relegated were Rotherham, Wigan and Preston. Manchester United, after getting relegated, finished 14th, while Liverpool was 16th. Arsenal and Tottenham were just outside the playoffs at 9th and 10th. And in the Champions League, it was the same old story. PSG beating Real Madrid in the final 2-0 to make it 3 Champions Leagues back-to-back for Paris Saint-Germain. Erling Haaland scoring early in that one. Now, we touched on players earlier on where they were, and Bukayo Saka actually plays for Real Madrid. And he has been there since leaving Arsenal every single season. What a turnaround in his career. He's gone from Arsenal to Real Madrid on a free transfer and has absolutely smashed it. Also, in their defence, they have William Saliba as well. I mean, he has been a rock for them. He did go to Juventus after leaving Arsenal, but a £73 million move saw him move to Spain. Juventus finally clinched European glory in this experiment, winning 3-0 in the final against Valencia. And in terms of former Premier League players or former Chelsea top 6 players, Juventus have Gabriel Salonia in goal for them. Now, he didn't get released by Chelsea at the start, so he was actually signed by West Brom for £12.75 million early on before a massive £31 million was spent on him by Juventus in 2027. Since then, he's been a mainstay and a first-choice goalkeeper and has done really, really well. And in the Conference League, Leeds lost in the final to Lazio 2-0. We have back-to-back Italian winners since that shock winner of Viking back in 2032. To finish this first season off, we'll have a look at where another player is. Let's have a look at Kevin De Bruyne. He is now an unemployed manager, having retired. He's age 42, and since leaving Manchester City, he went to Paris Saint-Germain on a free transfer before moving over to Saudi for £6 million and finish his career over there. Be interesting to see what happens when he finally gets that role as a manager. So, Everton win the Premier League. We have the same odd story in the Champions League, while Chelsea are finally back in the Premier League. I wonder what's going to happen in the next one. Right, then let's have a look at what happened in this season. Well, Everton have gone back-to-back Premier League winners. Burnley finished second. I mean, in fairness, 2, 3 and 4 are on the same points. I don't think I've ever seen that happen. Burnley, Villa and Newcastle all getting 71 points. Man City, well, they suffered the ignominy of being relegated again. Chelsea avoided relegation, though, getting 37 points, so they performed pretty well. Meanwhile, in the league, Wolves have got promoted with Manchester United on 81 and Liverpool have lost in the playoffs again. This is the second time it's happened to them and they miss out on promotion yet again. Arsenal finished 7th, Tottenham were down at 11th, so not a fantastic season for Tottenham. You've got to wonder whether Liverpool can push on from here because when it happened earlier on, they dropped off and I think they finished like 14th the season after. So they've got to really bounce back. They weren't a million miles away from Man United in second place either. It's just a juggernaut that keeps on rolling. PSG, 4-time back-to-back Champions League winners. That is impressive. They beat Barcelona 2-1 in the final. And not only that, but PSG, who didn't have a Champions League before this, well, they've now won it 7 times. I don't think we'll see that in real life, but they've won 7 European Cups, including 4 back-to-back. And they go and get the 5th back-to-back next season. Meanwhile, over in the Europa League, we had an all-English final with West Ham and coming out on top in extra time against Aston Villa, 1-0. So pretty good. That's the first time in 5 years we've had an English winner of the Europa League. And in the Conference League, Real Sociedad won 1-0 against Midtjylland over there. So again, I think that's the second time Sociedad have won it, which is pretty impressive for a club of their size. So as we've done after the previous season, let's have a look at a few players. Let's start with Ederson. Well, he left Manchester City and went to France and played 207 times for Paris Saint-Germain and then retired and left football altogether. Virgil van Dijk, after being released from Liverpool, went to Saudi to Al Ittihad. And again, he has left football. He's retired at 34 years old. Bruno Fernandes is still in the game. He's 40 years old and he's a loan manager. It's the strangest job you'd ever expect anybody to get. And after he left Manchester United, he went to Brighton and retired there in 2031, 2032. In fact, he didn't play a game that season, so I wonder if there was something else under there, maybe a long-term injury. But he retired at Brighton, so stayed in the Premier League. So we'll look at more players after the next season, but let's see if Everton can go triple Premier League winners back-to-back. Can PSG get a 5th Champions League back-to-back? I mean, that would be really impressive to do. Or will Real Madrid bounce back and claim the trophy that between them and PSG, nobody else is getting a look at? What about Liverpool, though? Last time they got to this stage, they got to the playoffs, they dropped off like a stone. Can they push on? And will Chelsea avoid relegation again? Well, let's find out. Right then, another season done. Let's see what happened. And my God, Everton have just recorded a back-to-back-to-back Premier League win. I didn't see it coming. I did not see it coming at all, but they finished on 80 points. Now, they did win this by possibly the narrowest of margins, by a goal. It was joint points with Newcastle. They got 80, but they won it on goal difference by a single goal. I mean, that is as close as you're ever going to get. At the other end of the table, Chelsea stayed up again. They finished 15th, while Man United avoided relegation thanks to a single goal. I didn't think I'd say that twice in a season, if I'm honest, but they finished 17th. Level points with Reading on 33, but that one goal. Now, they didn't score as many, but they conceded 5 less. So, fair play. Man United have avoided the drop this season. Be interesting to see how they build from here. Same with Chelsea, if they've comfortably avoided the drop this year. In the Championship, Nottingham Forest are champions, 92 points, with Blackburn finishing second on 90. Manchester City and Liverpool have both lost in the playoffs, while Arsenal won the playoffs and are going to be promoted. Tottenham just cannot break away from mid-table. They finished 11th, one place below Wrexham, who finished 10th. At some point, we're going to have to see if Tottenham can stop being Tottenham and actually do something properly. Meanwhile, in Europe, for the first time in their history, Newcastle have captured the Champions League. They beat Real Madrid in extra time 3-2 to stop PSG going 5-5. Again, can Newcastle build from here and become a European dominant force? We'll wait to find out. But that's great news for Newcastle finally capturing the trophy that's eluded them. And it was another English winner in the Europa League with an all-English final as Fulham beat Bournemouth 1-0. So that's back-to-back English winners of the Europa League. Again, these two teams need to look to go for strength from here. Meanwhile, in the Conference League, RB Salzburg beat Valencia 2-1 in the final to claim glory there. Now, I do have to wonder how much the Europa League run took out of Bournemouth, because just going back to the Premier League title, the Premier League table, they finished 14th. So I wonder how much that took out of them. Whereas Fulham qualified for the Champions League, six places for the Champions League this season in England. You would expect there to be an English team in the final with that many teams qualifying. Let's have a look at some of the players who left the clubs when we took them out of the Premier League. Let's start with Harry Maguire this time. He is now a 43-year-old manager, currently unemployed. After leaving Manchester United, he moved to Spain, where he made 2 appearances for Real Sociedad in 3 seasons, so they really didn't fancy him. He then got a free transfer to Stuttgart, where he was a mainstay for the first 3 seasons, and in his last jaunt made just 14 league appearances. Declan Rice. He's now a manager, retired at 37 years old. Now, although it doesn't have Arsenal on here, we all know that he signed for Arsenal at the start of this season, but bear in mind, he was released before that transfer would ever have been ratified in the game mode that we're using, as we're using real world. So instead of, after he left West Ham, he went to PSG on a free transfer, and he stayed there for the bulk of the remainder of his career before moving to Al Ahly. I was going to say Al Ittihad, but Al Ahly for £7 million, making 68 appearances for them over 2 seasons. While Jack Grealish retired from football at the age of 35, and after leaving Manchester City, he went to West Ham, where he made 144 appearances before going to Copenhagen and then finishing his career at Young Boys. Quite the step down when you consider he was at Manchester City to end up in Denmark and Switzerland. But I suppose the income tax is lower in Switzerland, so maybe he banked a bit of cash. Anyway, let's go on with the next season and see if we can have more English dominance in Europe, and if Everton can win a 4th Premier League title. For this season, we have a new Premier League winner. Fulham have captured the title with 86 points. Everton slipping down to 5th after back-to-back wins. While at the bottom of the table, well, Chelsea have managed to do it again. They have got relegated. Man United have avoided relegation again, finishing 17th again. But this time they were 4 points clear of the drops, for a slightly improved performance on last season. Meanwhile, in the Championship, Brentford have won the league, while Man City get promoted back to the Premier League, having finished 2nd. Liverpool dropped down to 8th after getting to the playoffs for 2 seasons running, while Tottenham are still stuck in mid-table obscurity. It's all very Spursy. However, we have back-to-back English winners of the Champions League, with Newcastle beating Napoli 2-1 in the final. In the Europa League, Rennes have recaptured the trophy after beating Roma on penalties after the game was 0-0 after extra time. And in the Europa Conference League, Valencia absolutely destroyed Ferencváros 3-0 in the final. I must admit, this is actually a team I've never heard of. They are in the Hungarian League. That stadium is fantastic as well for Hungary. It holds 22,000 capacity. And yeah, for actually them to get to the final is impressive in itself. Let's have a look at some of the players who have now either retired or are still playing at different clubs, and we'll start with Ruben Diaz. He's a 40-year-old manager, had no clubs since retiring. However, after leaving Manchester City, he went to PSG for the remainder of his career and had a really successful time while he was there. Trent Alexander-Arnold retired at the age of 35 and was a 2-club player. After leaving Liverpool, he went to Barcelona, where he made 228 league appearances, scoring 5 goals, and decided to step away from football altogether. While Luke Shaw is now 41 years old and an unemployed head of youth development. After leaving Manchester United, he went to Burnley, and he was at Burnley up and down in the Premier League and the Championship until 2029, where he left to go to Cruz Azul in Mexico for 2 seasons before retiring and looking at a staff role. And finally, Alisson. Well, he retired at 37, and after leaving Liverpool, he went to PSG, where he made 40 appearances. Then he went to Atletico, where he made 23, and finally he finished at Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia and made 32 appearances. So after Liverpool, he just never kicked on his career, which is a big shame, really, because he is a world-class goalkeeper. Anyway, Fulham, Premier League holders. Chelsea back in the Championship, while Man City are back in the Premier League, joining Man United, and Newcastle are back-to-back Premier League winners. I wonder if we're going to have another English winner of the Champions League. Let's find out. Right then, let's have a look how this season went. Well, Newcastle are once again champions of England. 90 points. They won it at pretty much a canter. Fulham, Aston Villa, Leicester and Everton making up the top 5 for Champions League places, while Palace and Leeds get Europa League, and West Ham finishing 8th get the Conference League. But the relegation zones are where it's interesting that Arsenal and Manchester City were both relegated, while Man United once again finished 17th. That's 3 seasons on the bounce, they finished 17th now and avoided relegation. That is even with losing 4 of their last 5 games before the end of the season. I mean, at some point they've either got to get relegated or kick on. It's one of the two. I mean, we are 4 seasons into this second part of this now, so we're 14 seasons in, and none of the top 6 are showing any signs of actually being able to compete in the Premier League. I thought we would have seen one breakaway by now. In the Championship, Derby County are back in the Premier League after finishing with 91 points, while Ipswich also joined them in promotion, as did Blackburn. Liverpool have again lost in the playoffs. It's almost like Liverpool and Spurs are never getting back to the Premier League. Chelsea finished mid-table at 12th, and Tottenham are edging closer to relegation, finishing 15th, with Coventry, Sheffield Wednesday and Charlton all being relegated from the Championship. In the Champions League, it was Barcelona that came out on top as they beat Newcastle, who reached the final again 2-1. Newcastle are starting to do really well in Europe, so maybe we'll see more wins for them over the coming years. While in the Europa League, it was another French winner as Marseille beat Valencia 1-0 in the final. And in the Conference League, Lazio beat SP Braga 1-0 as well. So all in all, Newcastle back on top. No winners of the... too much of a look at that. There we go. So Villa, Palace, Leeds, Sheffield United and Fulham are the last 5 winners of the FA Cup, with Fulham winning this year's beating Crystal Palace 2-1. Again, let's have a look at the players. Andy Robertson is an unemployed coach. He's 44 years old and hasn't had a job in coaching since he retired. After leaving Liverpool, he moved straight to Saudi Arabia, where he played for Al Riyadh until he retired in 2031. Raheem Sterling retired at 37, having moved straight to Saudi as well with Al Fatih and paid 289 times for them, retiring in 2032. In probably the most shocking move that I thought I didn't think I'd ever see this, Anthony has retired. He's 38 years old and he is a director of football. Hasn't had a job in staff since he retired, and I'm not shocked. And since leaving Manchester United, he went over to Brazil, where he played for Bahia in the Serie B, which is surprising. Then he went to Saudi with Denmark. So he didn't even play top-level football after leaving Manchester United, which I find quite interesting. How about Aaron Ramsdale? Well, after leaving Arsenal, he went to Barcelona, where he played 184 times. Then he went to Everton, and then he finished in Al Hilal in Saudi and retired at the age of 38. So we'll also have a look at the staff before we finish this episode to see where the managers that we released, or who were there, when we demoted them, ended up. But let's go on with the next season and see who comes out on top. Right, another season in the bag. Well, let's find out how we got on. Crystal Palace have won the Premier League, only drawing 1 game all season and conceding just 38 goals. Leeds, Fulham, Newcastle and Everton round out the top 5, while Leicester and Aston Villa qualified for the Europa League alongside West Ham. Now the big one is Man United finished 14th, but they beat Leicester in the final of the Carabao Cup, which means they're going to get Europa Champions League next season. Now, the last time this happened to United, they got relegated the season after because they couldn't balance out the league and the European schedule. So it will be interesting to see if they manage that this year. Meanwhile, in the Championship, Liverpool have missed out yet again, losing in the playoffs. Wolves and Stoke finished the top 2, and Chelsea went up in the playoffs. That is they only got up to the 5th place due to alphabetical order, because if you look, Watford for exactly the same points, goals, everything. Meanwhile, Tottenham are down at 19th. They are creeping ever closer to spursing this up and getting relegated back to League One. Man City and Arsenal finishing mid-table. In the FA Cup, Newcastle beat Aston Villa 4-1 in the final to end their drought in this competition. Remember, they did win it a couple of times in part 1 of this series. And they recorded a cup double as they beat Real Madrid 2-1 in the final to make it 3 wins out of 5 for them in the last 5 seasons. Newcastle are starting to become a real force in European football. While Leeds have claimed the Europa League, they beat Villarreal 2-1 in the final, fantastic result for them. And in the Europa Conference League, West Ham absolutely destroyed Wolfsburg 4-1 in their final to claim European glory. Now, we did say we'd have a look at where the managers ended up, and Jurgen Klopp, at the age of 71, is now retired. After leaving Liverpool, he went on to become manager of Uruguay, and after a 2-year spell, had a brief time in charge at Spain, before having a 6-year spell with Germany. They actually won the UEFA Nations League, the World Cup, and the European Football Championships under Jurgen Klopp. Fair to say he was very successful during his time with the German national team. Mikel Arteta, well, he didn't get another job, and he left in 2024, and that was it. And at the age of 47, he is now retired. Mauricio Pochettino, well, after he left Chelsea, he went on to manage Morocco shortly, but again, he retired, and at the age of 55, is no longer in football. This one I did expect. Pep Guardiola is still in football and is manager of Paris Saint-Germain. Now, he has been the manager there since 2035, and after leaving Manchester City, he had 4 years with Spain before moving to Inter Milan for 4 years, and then a single season at Aston Villa before the big job came in France. Not surprising that he has stayed within the bigger teams, but that spell in international football does surprise me a little bit. And Erik ten Hag, well, he stayed at Manchester United until 2026 before leaving to become manager at Ivory Coast, and is now retired, and at the age of 57 is no longer in football. So that is where the managers are. We'll have a look at some more players after the next season. The season is done. Well, let's see what happened. And Fulham have won the Premier League, losing just 3 games all season. Chelsea relegated back to the Championship, while Man United have once again finished 15th. Villa, Palace, Everton, Newcastle are all getting Champions League football along with Fulham, while Leicester, Sheffield United and Bournemouth are also in Europe next year. Pretty good season, and Fulham absolutely outperformed the rest of the teams and won it quite easily at Cantor. 6 points, sorry. Actually, my maths is that bad. That's 9 points. Oh, my days. They've won it quite comfortably with a goal difference easily above Villa in second. Meanwhile, in the Championship, Liverpool just cannot get through the playoffs. They finished 5th as Arsenal finished 6th. Both teams lost in the playoffs, with Reading, Preston and Blackburn going up. Relegated were Plymouth, Oxford and Bristol Rovers, while Tottenham finished 17th. Man City down in 10th. Interesting with Liverpool, Steven Gerrard is now manager and he just can't get them out of this league. In the FA Cup, Crystal Palace beat Newcastle in the final 2-1. So we've had a different winner of this for the last 5 seasons. It'll be interesting to see if anybody can establish some semblance of domination over it. But in something I never thought I'd see or say or hear, we had an all-English final that included Everton and Fulham in the Champions League, with Everton capturing the Champions League 3-1 in the final. That is... The English teams, I said in the first part, we didn't have that English domination. It was Paris Saint-Germain and it was Real Madrid. And the English teams are starting to dominate Europe now. Aston Villa and Leicester made it to the final of the Europa League, another all-English final, as Aston Villa ran out 3-1 winners with back-to-back English winners of this competition. So as I said a second ago, we are starting to see English teams start to take over Europe. And while it was a different story in the Conference League, Manchester United did make it to the final, but they lost 2-1 to Villarreal. How big that could have been for their finances and potential players they could attract to the club. It would have also given them another year in Europe had they gone on and won it, but they didn't. So we'll have to see if they can get it back into Europe next season. Let's have a look at some of the players again then. Andre Onana, so again, remember he was released before his transfer to Manchester United was ratified, which means he went straight from Inter to Atletico Madrid, where he played 17 times before being snapped up by Brighton, which was the mainstay of his career. 132 appearances before moving to Saudi and Al Ittihad to play 54 times for them. He retired at the age of 37 and is no longer in football. Jones is an unemployed coach at the age of 39, has had no jobs in coaching at all. And since leaving Liverpool, he went over to Qatar and played for Al Sadd until 2028 when Brentford came into him and signed him. He was there until 2035 before moving to Turkey with Trabzonspor and retired over there. While Alejandro Garnacho is still playing at the age of 35, he's out at Al Hilal, and since leaving Manchester United, he has been around a number of different clubs. After he was released by Man United, he moved to River Plate in Argentina before coming back to Wolves on a free. He was then sent on loan to Southampton before he returned to Wolves for 2 pretty decent performance-ranked seasons. And then he went out to Saudi, to Al Riyadh, and then Al Hilal, where he plays now. So it's fair to say he's become a little bit of a journeyman since his time at Old Trafford. Meanwhile, Eddie Nketiah is retired and no longer in football at 35 after leaving Arsenal. He went to Aston Villa where he scored 102 goals in 235 appearances before moving to Lens in France where he retired after 61 games. Right, let's see how we get on in the next game, or the next season, and see if we can have some more success in Europe. The season done. Well, let's see what happens. Fulham are back-to-back Premier League champions, while Blackburn, Preston and Brentford all got relegated. But the big change here is that Manchester United have skyrocketed up the Premier League and now finished 5th, just 2 points outside of the top 4. Now, the question always remains is, can they keep it there? And I have my reservations, but time will tell. Meanwhile, in the Championship, Chelsea won the league. They finished 93 points, 5 points ahead of Barnsley in second, and Liverpool have managed to lose in the playoffs again. I find that quite amazing. Man City finished 7th, while Tottenham was 16th and Arsenal were down at 18th, with Blackpool, QPR and Wrexham getting relegated. And while not having won the Champions League for a number of years, PSG dominated Juventus in the final to win 3-1. Over in the Europa League, Monaco claimed victory in the final, beating Roma 3-0, ending 2 years of English dominance. And Besiktas came glory in the Europa Conference League, winning 2-1 in extra time, beating Nice. Let's have a look at some more players then before we get on with the next season. Luis Diaz retired at the age of 34, and after Liverpool he went over to France and played 170 times for Rennes before moving to Saudi and Al Hilal, playing 68 games, scoring 49 goals. That is a brilliant goal-to-game ratio. Meanwhile, Anthony Martial, who had barely kicked a ball through injuries, lack of effort, lack of training and everything else during his time at Manchester United, went back to France and played for Lille. 27 goals in 77 games before getting a move to Monaco, where he scored 11 times in 33 and retired at the age of 32. And finally, for this one, Jadon Sancho. Well, after Man United, his career really didn't kick on. He went to Newcastle and played 111 times and then went to Saudi and played 127 and retired at the age of 34. Let's go on with the next season then. We've got 3 years to go. Let's see how we get on. And we're 2 seasons away now from finishing this complete experiment. It'll be 20 years since we removed the top 6. And let's have a look what happened. So Fulham are 3 times back-to-back winning the Premier League. That is, that's impressive for Fulham, to be fair. Everton finished 2nd with Villa, Palace and Newcastle making up the rest of the top 5. Leicester, Sunderland, 6th and 7th getting Europa League as well. So all in all, pretty good season for them. Wolves, Reading and Luton getting relegated, while Man United had plummeted from 5th down to 16th. In the Championship, Arsenal won the league by a point, pipping Stoke on the last day of the season. Nottingham Forest joined them in getting promoted via the playoffs, while Liverpool once again missed out. But as you can see, Liverpool actually got Europa Conference League football next season because they won the Carabao Cup. So least they do have something to cheer. If we look at the other teams, you've got Man City, Tottenham are right down the bottom of the table in 16th and 18th, with Sheffield Wednesday, Bolton and Bristol Rovers getting relegated. Fulham made it a League and Cup double as they beat Everton 3-0 in the FA Cup final. Fulham have really become the team in the second part of this after Newcastle just seemed to have fallen away from winning anything over the last couple of years. Everton are Champions League winners after they beat Napoli 2-0 in the final with 2 goals in the first half. Everton really have got something to cheer about as they're now the dominant team on Merseyside. And Manchester United have also claimed European glory, beating Leicester on penalties in the final there. They were dominated throughout the game with Leicester having double the shots, but they just weren't clinical enough to get the win. And in the Conference League, Brighton claimed glory, winning on penalties against SK Sturm. Pretty even game, but you can only say that Brighton were more clinical with their penalties than SK Sturm. So we've got 2 years left. Fulham are becoming the dominant team in England at the moment with 3 back-to-back Premier League titles and an FA Cup win. Man United have won a European trophy, while Liverpool will play in Europe for the first time during the last 20 years. Let's see what happens in the next season. Season is done. Well, let's see what happened. Newcastle, after me saying that they've struggled to win anything in recent years, have come back with a vengeance and won the Premier League and had a bit of a canter by 9 points. Aston Villa, Fulham, Everton and Leeds making up the rest of the top 5, with Burnley, Bournemouth, Palace and Brighton also getting European spots. Manchester United, Arsenal and Chelsea all safe of relegation as they all finish around mid-table. Chelsea just 2 points above the relegation zone. But the big shock here is West Ham have been relegated. I did not see that coming in any way, shape or form. They've been playing so well over the last, it's 18 years now, 19 years now, sorry, and they've not been really close. So to see them get relegated is a bit of a shock, but it'll be interesting to see whether they can bounce back at the first time of asking. Meanwhile, in the Championship, Brentford and Reading got promoted. Brentford actually getting 100 points, and Liverpool have finally won a playoff. Even if it was on penalties, they beat Manchester City in the final to spend the last of the 20 years in the Premier League. Let's see if they can stay up. Man City finished 4th, while Tottenham were down at 16th. Tottenham have become a Championship team, and when you consider the stadium they're in, it's a bit embarrassing. Newcastle not only won the league, to prove me wrong, they did a League and Cup double as they beat Leeds 1-0 in the final. And Everton again reached the final of the Champions League, but unfortunately this time they lost 1-0 to Barcelona. But still winning it twice in the last 5 years is really impressive. Sunderland made it to the final of the Europa League and they lost on finals to Brighton. What a performance that is from Sunderland, and we have back-to-back English winners. And meanwhile, in the Europa Conference League, Athletic Bilbao built Victor Plzen in the final 2-1. So Brighton, who won the Europa Conference League last year, went one better, and Athletic, claimed another victory. One thing I want to point out, and it was mentioned a few times in the comments, is that Sunderland should have been in the Premier League. Now, Sunderland are in the Premier League, and they actually finished mid-table this season. Not only that, they reached the European final. So to all the Sunderland fans watching this, you are performing better than I expected. Anyway, we've got 1 season left. Let's see how we get on. Right then, our 20th season is in the bag. Let's find out exactly how we got on. Fulham claimed the Premier League, winning 4 of the last 5. It's starting to look like a new team is going to dominate this league moving forward. Leeds, Villa and Newcastle rounding up the top 4, while Chelsea finished 8th, claiming Europa League football next season. Man United 12th, and Liverpool and Arsenal were sent packing back to the Championship. Meanwhile, in the Championship, Manchester City won the league with 101 points, Blackburn second on 99, and West Ham bounced back at the first time of asking with 92. Tottenham, on the other hand, have decided they like playing in the Championship and don't want to play Premier League football anymore, as they have decided they're going to be a mid-table club, finishing 11th. QPR, Bristol City and Birmingham getting relegated. And in the FA Cup, Chelsea claimed victory 1-0 over Leeds in the final. It certainly has been a decent rise for Chelsea after they got stuck in the Championship for a few years, but you could probably argue they may have cemented their place in the Premier League now. Meanwhile, in the Champions League, the old favourites returned. PSG, after not being in the final for the last 2 years, came back with a vengeance in season 20 and beat Bayern Munich. Let me just let this sink in for you guys for a second. This is the first time in 20 seasons we've seen Bayern Munich in the Champions League final. 20 seasons without... I can't imagine that happening. But I also can't imagine PSG winning 8 or 9 European Cups in the next 20 years. So who knows? Meanwhile, in the Europa League, Lazio beat Mainz 2-1 in the final. Brilliant result for them, and fair play to Mainz getting to the final. And in the Conference League, Crystal Palace claimed glory, beating Austria Vienna 1-0 to round out the 20 years. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please hit like and subscribe. In our next experiment, we're going to be looking at who the bookies have as favourite to replace Jurgen Klopp. And then we're going to see how they get on in one season. It'll certainly be interesting looking at the likes of Xabi Alonso, De Zerbi, maybe even Steven Gerrard. I think he was 20-1. But remember, this has certainly been enjoyable to do, and it might not be as realistic as you think. I know some people think Tottenham aren't part of the top 6, but if you want to download the database and have a go yourself, the link is in the description below. I'll see you all in the next experiment. Have a good one, guys.